Yes, we have our Bishop Oneil Williams. He is on the program today, and we're going to be talking about a very important subject. You really want to tune in. If you know any friends that are going through a hard time in their relationship, or they have already even gotten divorced and they're dealing with the fact that they're experiencing that, this is the program that you want them to tune into, because that's what we're going to be discussing today. But we're talking from the perspective of what men have to deal with when it comes to divorce. We have other programs, of course, that talk about what women experience during and through going through a divorce, but we're going to talk about it from a male perspective. And we really want you to tune in because it's going to be very interesting what you learn on the Oneil effect. And so I'm going to open up and introduce our host for today, Bishop Oneil Williams. Bishop Oneil.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the O'Neill Effect. So happy that you're able to join in with us this morning in this program. And so this is our third program that I believe. And so as our host says, my name is Bishop O'Neill Williams, and I will be your host this morning. And so I would like to start out this morning, first of all, just to say, hope that you have had a good month since the last time we met, and also have had a good week and looking forward for a great weekend. This morning, this program is to empower and encourage you to win in life. That's the reason for the O'Neill effect. It is to encourage you. It is to help you to win in life, no matter what life throws at you. You are the hero of your movie. And God has not forgotten you. He just has a surprise ending that will shock the doubters about you. And so that's the reason why we look for topics that we believe can encourage you, enlighten you, and make your life a winning process. So, so this morning, I want to welcome you wherever you are across the globe watching the O'Neill Effect. Now, this show is piggybacking off of my book. And so please don't forget to order your book today. Stop the Procession is in pre-sale mode right now. It's only $15. And it says the title is Stop the Procession. It's your time to win. This offer ends soon, and we're asking you to get involved, order this book, get it on in production so that we can get it out to you. What we discuss on the O'Neill effect also comes from this book. It will be a part of most of the highlights will be in this book. And so you will be encouraged. You will have this to go over every time you find yourself in a difficult place. You can read this. You can buy it as a gift for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for someone. Many of you have already gotten this book, but I'm saying to my friends, please go out and get this book. Don't forget to order it. And so today, we're going to continue our program with my guest from the last program, Pastor McKee. But before we get into that and highlight that, let me give you just a little reading from my book as an intro to the program. And I'm reading where it says, I'm writing this book because I know what pain and failures look like, what it feels like to have the bottom fell out from underneath you. I remember getting up that Monday morning after resigning my church, feeling hopeless, with no job, no money, no career beyond pastoring, which has already failed me, and no one to call on, feeling unwanted. The feeling as if you will never come back is a bitter feeling to have. It leaves a nasty taste in your mouth. How do you pull yourself up and come back? Paul the Apostle always uses his experience as a lesson to teach others how not to walk down the same path as he did. It is therefore my intention to motivate and assist the next person whose life seems like it is driving you away from your happy place. You see, and to help you connect with the right sources that will help you to rise again. It is only over when you give up. So today, we're here to help you. If you have found yourself in a divorce as a man, today we're here to help you. Today we're here to give you some pointers. Because this program that was aired the last time with Pastor McKee, as we talk about his life and we look at the whole aspect of divorce in ministry, this program was so overwhelmed, and the response to after airing it was so overwhelming that we decided that we're going to do a part two. But this time, we're not going to do a part two trying to find out more about Pastor McKee, because we already know who he is. So me and him today, we're going, because I've experienced the same thing that he has, being a divorcee myself, and also him being that. I believe that we can be able to help you because we have been there. I think we can help you to master some things that you're going through. And so we're going to deal with 6 issues that men face in divorce. So before I go any further, I'm going to ask Pastor McKee one more time just to introduce himself, tell us some more about him, that because there are going to be people who are going to be watching who probably have seen the last program. So I'm going to ask him just to introduce himself and tell us something about him and who he really is.
Blessings to you, Bishop Oneil, and good morning to everyone. Definitely an honor yet again to be on your show. And to those that don't know me or did not see the first show, yes, my name is Pastor Matthew McKee. I serve as an assistant pastor at the Holy Love Outreach Ministries right in Brooklyn, New York. And I am one that I've been through. I've dealt with a divorce, and as we often say, divorce is not something that most people see coming in their life. No one gets married to get divorced, but life does happen, and how you respond, how you recover from it is going to dictate whether or not you're able to step into the blessings of God for you, or as Bishop Oneil Williams would say, your ability to win. So without belaboring the time, because I'm excited about the program today and what we're going to talk about, I'm going to stop there, and we'll get into what Bishop Oneil has for us.
Thank you, Pastor McKee. So, Pastor McKee, we're going to look at 6 issues men face in divorce. And hopefully you and I can dialogue through this and help some men. And the reason we're not being sexist, don't get me wrong, we're not trying to make it look like women don't face issues. But the reason we're touching on this because the matureness of men don't seem like it has blocked the emotional aspect of going through a divorce. And most time people don't think that men goes through some issues in divorce and feel like we're too macho, we're too much of a man, so maybe it's the woman alone who faces all these emotional issues. And so we're going to talk from our perspective, what we have been through, and we're also going to look at some things that hopefully we can discuss. Now, first of all, divorce is not easy for anyone. It may be the right choice. It may be what needs to happen, but that doesn't make it simple or comfortable. Men and women face a number of different issues during the dissolution of the marriage, from the tangible, concrete down and dirty detail things that can be measured and accounted for, like money, property, and to those that are much less quantifiable. So like the emotional stress and pain of separation, which we're going to look at that part of it. So for men, the prospect of divorce brings with it a unique set of complications, problems, and issues. Though ending a marriage and moving forward with your life can be a liberation, the process may also come with consequences, both expected and otherwise. So the first thing that we're going to deal with this morning, Pastor McKee, is the emotional distress. So statistically speaking, women file for the vast majority of divorces. according to one recent study that I've had a chance to look to be able to view, it says that wives initiate nearly 70% of divorces. 70%. One way to look at what this means is that women appear to be coming to terms with the death of a marriage before it's officially over, whereas men may be left to do so during and after the fact. So practically speaking, if your wife files for divorce and it comes as a surprise, it can indicate that she is already on her way to coping with that emotional impact. No, when I thought about that, it baffles me, Pastor McKee, because we didn't think that about the woman. But if a woman files for a divorce, in her mind, she already prepared herself emotionally to deal with it, while the man is being surprised by it. So what I want to talk about is, and I want to just use your experience and my experience. So let me talk about my experience first, and then you can talk about yours, the emotional part, distress of a divorce. On the other hand, as a man, we have to manage emotional roller coaster while also dealing with the day-to-day realities of going through the separation. So further complicating the matter are our social construct as men. So we have to deal with people around us, especially as ministers. We have to deal with the people in our lives, the men, the women, the children, and all of those stuff. So what was your emotion at the time like when you were going through this aspect?
That's a great question. And I could honestly say, Bishop, I was all over the place. I was some days sad, some days confused, some days angry. Some days I felt like there was a level of disconnect with even what was going on in my reality, because I believe that what we do experience as human beings is we do go through just a bevy of different emotions, and we're trying to process through what has transpired. And sometimes you are also battling with if this is really happening. So you're actually battling with, is this real? Is this really happening? Because you would wake up on certain days and you would have thought you were just living through a bad nightmare. And then you remember in that morning that you're waking up, oh yeah, this is real. This is really happening. So just a bevy of different emotions, an emotional roller coaster, and processing those emotions become the challenge, as you obviously know. And this is why this particular point of emotional distress is so important, because that's a real thing. And it's a real hurdle that we have to face, confront, and deal with. And so sometimes you do need the right people to talk to. And that's why I also believe, even like men, I think we've got to take the time to recenter ourselves, recalibrate, and make sure that we're getting the help that we need to really process through the emotional strain that comes with the fallout. And I'm gonna say this lastly, I liken divorce to really being very similar to the death of a loved one. When you go through a divorce, it's like dealing with the death of a loved one, because there is a mourning that comes with it. There is a gripping sadness that comes with it, because it's like someone actually did die, though someone didn't physically die. That relationship, it's come to an end. So it's like the death of a loved one. So that mourning and that grieving process is important that we pay attention to.
Now, I'm glad you say that, because men are stereotypically strong and silent and don't outwardly express their feelings. And so when dealing with what can be an incredible, upsetting, even excruciating situation, such as divorce, attempting to keep a stiff upper lip and pretend that everything is fine when it isn't can be a difficult and an unhealthy situation. Now, would you recommend because men don't like to do this. For me, when I was going through my separation and eventually into my divorce, I had emotional ups and downs. The emotional part when you have flashbacks of the good times, flashback of why you got into this in the first place. You wanted it to work. You wanted it to continue to be great. And then you're thinking about the people around you who are going to you're now becoming a part of statistic. You're going to become being stereotyped now as a divorcee. And so as a man who's going through that, would you recommend for men to see counseling in a situation when they're like that, even if they're trying to lock it in and you don't feel the emotion of it? Would you recommend that they still go out and get help?
Absolutely. Bishop Oneil, I absolutely recommend it, because as we often state, the popular quote, hurt people. And sometimes the hurt that we are trying to, suppress becomes literally like a ticking time bomb. And what we don't realize is that we're going to take that same, hurt or pain or unprocessed emotion, and we're going to release that into a new relationship. If that comes, and when that comes, we're going to release that into new situations and new scenarios. It's called displacement, and it's and we often are guilty of that because we fail to confront something that is there. And so counseling is important because counseling helps to really confront certain things that we might be aware of, and also confront things that we're not aware of. So counseling is a way that we can expose things that are glaring and things that we don't even know are kind of like deeply entrenched in us from an emotional fallout or from a relational fallout. So I absolutely recommend it.
Thanks for that, because I do support that also recommendation. Now, let me ask you another question, because as I said, we're speaking from experience. We're not pastors trying to counsel somebody from a theological point of view or a spiritual point of view. We're talking about it from a personal perspective. So divorce can deliver chaotic, mixed feelings. Let me ask a question, such as, which one of these did you experience? If you did, you can have guilt, anxiety, fear, self-esteem, self-worth can significantly be hit. And so as a man, we know how to cover it up because we don't want nobody else to know that I'm having anxiety problem. I'm having self-esteem problem, I'm having self-worth. It may affect the way that I see the next relationship or how I move on from here. Do you think that's something that that is typically what men face in a divorce situation?
Yes, I believe that it could be one of all of those things, if not at least two of them, and or more. Definitely, especially from a pastor's seat, I felt guilt and anxiety the strongest. I felt guilt and anxiety the strongest because, as pastors, which I know you can obviously relate to it, the way we're socialized and the way even our culture, whether it's our ethnic background or even just our church culture, it can be very harsh on a pastor that's dealing with divorce. So the level of anxiety, just based on that alone, what are people gonna say? What are people gonna think? How are people gonna respond to my situation or to my new reality? Will I be accepted? And then you see some people visibly change on you and start to treat you, according to what the new narrative that has hit your life is saying. So it's very
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah.
And that can affect your self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah. It can. easily affect your self-worth, because now you start to question so many things about yourself. And that's also where the guilt comes in too, because I think the thing that I felt guilty the most about was, as a man, I felt like I failed as a husband to hold my family together, or I said to myself, was there anything else I could have done that could have made this thing work? So I often had that dialogue with myself internally. So it can affect so many different things. And I think the fear aspect could creep in, because you start to fear what your destiny holds, or what's coming now in your future. Will you ever remarry? Will you struggle to find someone that fits your life's journey, your life's goals? So like you said, all of those parameters that you mentioned can in fact be in play, and usually are in play to a great degree. And it causes us to obviously go through just the emotional roller coaster that we go through.
I'm glad you say that, because I'm going to also say to the men who probably watch us, even though these are not, all of these are not just subjected to men alone. Not only men goes through this situation, but the reality of it is that most of these men are perceived machismo men that denies the right to cry, or show any other sign of weakness whatsoever. So as a man, we cry in seclusion, we cry alone. And sometimes when you're going through situations like this, and I know a lot of men are watching right now, and you said, you know what, that's so true. I didn't realize I was experiencing anxiety. I didn't realize that was what it was. I didn't realize my self-esteem was because of my divorce. I didn't realize that. So there's possible no outlet sometimes for these men to let out what they're feeling, the low self-esteem for being unable to keep the relationship ticking, resentment, and maybe angry time at times, as you mentioned. In certain cases, this may lead to deteriorating health and condition as well, because now you start having this depressive mode of thinking. So this emotional condition can act in a major way that spoils a man's mojo to be able to be that man that he's supposed to be. Now, what was your way, Pastor McKee? My way, before I ask you your way, let me tell you my way. My way of handling my ups and downs at the time, and my emotional instability at the time was because I found friends to talk to. Not a lot. You have to know who you can trust.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what I also did was I made my life spiritually stronger in God, so that the days when I have nobody around me, I can find a song that speaks to me, or a word, or God can find a scripture that throws in my spirit that speaks to me and keep me going. What was your backup for your emotional state that you went through in that situation? What did you use to do?
It was very similar to yours, Bishop. I didn't go to a whole lot of people or speak to a whole lot of people concerning what was really going on in the core of who I was, because as you just wonderfully mentioned, you have to know who you can trust. You have to know who has the ability to speak into you, to also hear what you're saying, and to process what you're saying, and then to speak to it or speak into it in wisdom and in counsel. But so it was that. It was also the same thing. I went on a personal spiritual journey, of self-analysis, of self-building, of affirmations within myself, and also finding a deeper reservoir of who I was in God. So spiritual foundation is so important. It's so important because while I do obviously support counseling and seeking counsel, I believe that when you have a strong spiritual foundation, it has a way of steering and governing what's going on in your mind, and also what's going on with you emotionally, having that firm spiritual foundation. So those were the two things that I really indulged myself in. I read a lot, Bishop. I read a lot. Not only the Word of God, but I read a lot of books, much like the book that you have now, yes, you have now authored and are is about to be released. Those types of books, as well as the Word of God, are so helpful. It's so therapeutic. It's medicine, because it's so enriching to read about someone going through a similar life experience or their own personal life experience, that they have bounced back, they have recovered, and they are now kind of on the good foot, walking into their winning season. Because oftentimes to win at a high level in life, it usually comes after you've lost some things, So I truly believe that that's how I was able to process through, and what kind of got me back to a place of health and going strong now.
Thank you, sir. Now, my second point that I want to jump at, and I'm going to ask you the question as we dialogue through this. Do you believe that marriage goes through a grieving process?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Divorce, I should say.
Yes, when you go through a divorce, it is parallel to the death of a loved one. It really is, because something died. Or work, exactly. Something died. Something that you put time in, something that you put energy in, emotion in. You invested, not just love, but you invested time, energy, emotions. You name it, you have invested. You literally planned a whole life with this person. That's why you asked them for their hand in marriage. That's why you did the vows, till death do us part, and all those things. You've invested something. You've given yourself to something. And when that thing falls apart, when you go through the process of a divorce, it is akin to the death of a loved one. And so it's so important that people that have dealt with divorce or are dealing with divorce, you must spend the time to grieve. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, to everything, there's a season and a time to every purpose. And one of the things that God has given us time for is a time to mourn. And a lot of us skip the time to mourn. And we just try to rush and shellac ourselves into a new relationship. But the problem is, you're going to mourn whether you want to or not.
I'm glad you said that, Pastor McKee, because that is so important what you just said. I remembered, and for those who are watching, we're on our second point, men skip the grieving process. That's what we're looking at now, men skipping the grieving process. And I remembered when I wasn't divorced yet, but I remember when I went through the separation. And I remember one Good Friday, I was going to church, and that was the first Good Friday without my family. And I dropped down in the bathroom and cried like a baby, because I am used to going to Good Friday service with my son and my wife in the same car. And I cried like a baby. And I didn't realize I was grieving. I was going through a grieving process that we as men skip. But that day broke me for the first time. And so, as you have alluded to, losing a marriage as a man, you are going to go through a grieving process. And as I mentioned, losing in case of a marriage dissolution who has been your partner in your life for a long time. And grief is a natural feeling. See, because when men skip the grieving period, it brings a sense of loss. As their plans are derailed, goals and dreams are changed. and the life plan will differ substantially when you look back at that. So all of those coupled together send you through a grieving process, because now I don't care how bad the marriage was, there had to be some good days.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you look back at what could have been and send you through this grieving process. So did you ever had that moment when that one moment where you just let it out? Have you ever had
Yes,
that moment? You just let it out. You just bawl like a baby. Have you had that
absolutely,
moment?
absolutely. And it was obviously it was pretty soon after I realized that the divorce was pretty much imminent, like it was now in the process and it was real. Because even after she filed for divorce, and I obviously at that time reluctantly kind of signed off on it, agreed to it, because I believe that, I always say that I believe that everyone has a right to be happy. And if someone believes that they're not going to be happy, then who am I to stand in the way of that? But when it really hit me, I had that moment where I just sat down and the tears just began to flow. And you have to embrace that moment, you know. Weirdly enough, I look back at it now, and I'm just glad I had that moment. And I truly believe, and I'll say this for anyone that's ever dealt with divorce, or that's dealing with it, and I'm pretty sure you can co-sign. Holidays are the worst.
Yes.
Holidays become the worst times.
I was about to tell you about my Christmas.
Yeah.
That
Oh
was
my
my
goodness.
first Christmas without my family. I decorated my apartment, and beautiful. I mean, my first Christmas decoration by myself. I decorated the apartment so beautiful. Then I throw in some Luther Vandross Christmas song, and it started to play. And bro, I just went from being this man who just decorated his place to become this soppy little baby, just
Man,
crying
that's real
because
talk.
my first Christmas without my family.
That
And so
Bishop,
that's,
that's
go ahead, sir.
that is real. That is so real. And it's so great that we can be able to transparently share these moments, because these moments, they happen whether you try to fight it off or not, whether you try to be honest with it or not. And as I was saying earlier, you're going to mourn, you're going to grieve whether you want to or not. Some of us try to circumvent the grieving process, and we try to pretend like it's not happening or like it doesn't exist. And the worst thing you can do is when you try to force yourself into moving on or moving forward without taking the appropriate time to grieve.
Let's talk about that for
Yeah,
let's take that point and move it a little further.
yeah.
How long would you say that a man should go through a grieving and a healing before they move on to a connecting?
Wow. I think I'm not sure if you can assign a specific time to it, but I would say to really, I think to really make sure that you have kind of detoxed yourself and offloaded things layer by layer, because there are layers to the level of hurt that you go through dealing with a divorce. You know, there's the emotional, there's the psychological impact, there's the spiritual impact, and then there's the physical fallout from, especially as a man of faith, there's a physical fallout that comes too, because you go from having access to not having access to any type of physical touch or activity. If in fact that's the strictness or the discipline that you are living with. But I would say anywhere from about 6 months to a year is a good amount of time to process emotionally, because even after almost 2 years that I did not re-engage dating after my divorce. When I finally started dating again, Bishop, I was still like, there were still some reservations. There was still some residue of things that were sitting on me that I thought I was well past. And then I had to go, I have to go back into the lab now, into the spiritual lab, or into the lab, whether that is with a counselor. I had to go back into the lab and start to process this. Maybe I need to talk about this some more. Maybe I need to make sure I reassess what I really do feel about this situation or this thing. Because the truth be told, there's layers to it. And I do think it varies, Bishop, when it comes to you. And I'm telling you something. I think that it takes years to get fully over certain things. Because I'm telling you, after 2 years, Bishop, there were still some soft spots. There were still some vulnerabilities. There were still some sores. I felt like I was healing holistically, but I felt like there were some things that were still in the process of, you know? So I really think that it varies.
Yes, and as it was noted a while ago, one counselor recommend 5 years to before you even start thinking about that. And I do believe that. I've been separated now for eight years, and are divorced, separated for 6, divorced for 2. And one of the things is that the reason I stayed separated that long without being divorced was because in my mind, as I'm hoping that there could have been a reconnection. So if you're thinking that, then you can't connect with anybody else, because you have not gotten over that person. If you in your mind thinking that maybe I can reunite, then trying to move on may not be in your best interest, or the person you're trying to move on with best interest. And I think, this is my opinion, I think sometimes that's why the second marriage didn't work. That's why the third marriage didn't work, because you have not gotten over the first. And then you bring the first into the second, and the second into the third. So you start complicating your life. So I think that going through that healing process, dealing with the grieving process is important. You have to grieve as a man. You have to go through the grieving process as a man. Nothing is wrong with crying. Nothing is wrong with letting it out. But I know this, I mean, man, we're not going to get to all our points today, but let's keep going.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want the men to do, because a lot of women don't think men concerned about this, but the custody issues that men face in divorce, the custody issue, if there are minor children involved in this dissolution of a marriage, the situation becomes even more complex. When the kids come into play, it can intensify and strain nerve-wracking situation and further complicate what may already be a tricky, delicate process. Now, I don't know if you have kids, but for me, when I was I stayed at home after my separation. I never left. I stayed home because when the first year that we separated, my son took it hard. My son was a straight A kid in school, straight A kid in school. And when he learned that we were going to the separation, the teacher called us in one day and said, I don't know what's going on at home, but Matthew has dropped his grade really bad. And I realized that it wasn't him, it was us. And it was me. And I think he thought that, you know what, my dad is not going, because I'm the one who take him to school in the mornings, because my wife had to work and she worked late. And so I'm the one who picked him up from the bus stop. So we have that bond, we have that relationship. And I think he was thinking at the time was about 14, maybe no, 12, 13. And I think he was thinking that maybe I'm not going to be around my dad anymore. Maybe my dad's going to be there to pick me up anymore. So emotionally, it affects the child. And so I made a conscious decision to stay in the same house because of him. And so going through a custody issues, because while this may not have been so-called a custody issue, but it involved the child in the divorce. So I don't know if you have children.
Yes.
And how did you handle that?
Well, I have one daughter. She's now she's 8, gonna be 9 in December. Mm-hmm. And honestly, we were able to really sit down and talk about from the legal standpoint, custody issues and custody. She has custody in terms of having her, living with her. She has full custody, but we were able to sit down and map out and with integrity agree on the involvement, the days that I would have her, the days that she would have her. And it's really like joint custody, the way we operate. We co-parent, we co-parent actually very well. And I really, this might sound strange, I do consider myself somewhat of an anomaly where it comes to that aspect, because she is a great mother to our daughter. And I believe that I put all I have to, I can put into and put my best foot forward as a father. And I think we do a great job co-parenting. So I know that for my personal situation, the custody situation wasn't really much of an issue at all. In fact, I think we do a tremendous job co-parenting. And I think our daughter has benefited because we pay attention to how we are, what we do, and how we share the responsibility to make sure that she's okay. So she's prioritized. But I do know quite a few other situations and individuals, friends, and even family that have been through some really harsh custody battles and situations. And it can be something that, as you mentioned, it can drastically affect our children, you know, and it really can become very ugly.
Absolutely. And if you're a man right now and you find yourself in that position where you're going through a divorce or you're already divorced, no matter the state of the relationship between you and your ex, kids needs a sense of stability and security
Yes,
and to
yes,
know their father loves them. But one of the things that I would say, no matter how contentious or bitter your split is, it is important to not use your kids as pawns or bargaining chips or for
that's
petty
right.
acts of revenge because you are hurting your children. Most times in a custody battle, the custody is more emotional than the divorce.
Yeah,
And so as a man, one of the issues that men deal with, as we're talking about issues in divorce among men, is that sometimes they use the children as a pawn
yeah,
and thinking that they are hurting the wife or the ex, but you're not. You're actually hurting your relationship with your children. And so you've got to manage that. I had the same experience with you. I've never had a problem with custody problem with my son. And so, but a lot of people have gone, I've learned of people who have gone through those stuff, lost, you will lose the respect of your children if you don't handle it properly. So we got men have to know how to deal with the cost of the battle. The other thing, I'm going to jump to this point, Pastor McKee. We're probably going to touch this another time, but one of the things that affect men a lot in 21st century divorce situation is financial worries. The financial burden of divorce can be substantial. Just the process of dissolving a marriage may be very well costly. It can be costly. There are legal charges, especially if you have properties and assets together. Beyond these expenses, your final settlement in terms of most time in the divorce, the man has to leave. Most time in the divorce, the man moves out. So you got to start think about new place, new furnitures, new things. But the most important thing that we've seen in this 21st century is that women don't sit at home anymore and babysit. They are hard workers most time, making more money than the man. And so in a divorce battle, if that's the case, men deal with financial worries that can also emotionally affect them. And so my thing to you is, if you were to talk to a man right now who's going through that, and he may say to you, Pastor McKee, my wife was the breadwinner, making more money, not really the breadwinner, but she was making more money. If I leaving her now, I don't know what I'm going to do. What would you say to that man?
wow, that's a very prolific point you point out, because when a man feels a sense of the inability to take care of himself or to provide for himself and his family from a financial standpoint, it is one of the greatest blows to the masculinity of a man.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest blows because we are wired a certain way as men, to be providers, to be priests, protectors, providers. And when we feel an inability to do so, it can be a huge shot to our masculinity and our sense of wholeness and even empowerment as a man, So I would say to that person, number one, um, you have to be able to somehow manage the stress and anxiety that will come about by that feeling of helplessness. Why is it important to manage that? Because for you to be able to formulate a plan of action, the steps of how you're going to now position yourself going forward to change that dynamic, that financial fallout. You're gonna need your mind. You can't lose your mind because you're gonna need it in order to plan and to organize and to focus on possibilities going forward of how you're gonna recover. So first thing I would tell them, don't stress out. Don't let anxiety overwhelm you. Try to calm yourself, calm your fears. But most importantly, too, I would also say to that individual, to that man, you must find people that you can really talk to and confide in, the people that can help you. And that takes a lot to get a man to that place of vulnerability. Because, we do have healthy egos as men, right? The male ego is a real thing. And there is a part of the male ego that's healthy. There's a part of it that's unhealthy, but there's a part of it that's healthy. And you got to find, and this is where brotherhood, I truly believe, this is why I believe in the power of brotherhood. Because a man going through divorce, I can honestly tell you, the brothers that I have in my life, the men of God, the brothers, whether they're on equal paring in terms of the level of ministry or even sons that I have in my circle, helped power me through emotional fallout, financial fallout, psychological fallout, all of that. All of the fallouts that exist through divorce, the brotherhood that exists in my life helped power me through it. So I think it's important for men to find brotherhood, quality brotherhood that you can lean on in times of fallout. So that's what I would say to them.
I'm glad you said that. And the other thing I wanted to add to that, that's a very good point about finding support stream that you can rely on to help you emotionally go through this. And that's the reason why these issues that we're talking about are so important, because you have to take them step by step. You have to learn how to handle different steps of that you're going to face in this situation. And you meant, and I mentioned, and as you mentioned, when your wife filed for divorce, and as I mentioned in my beginning, is that when a woman files for divorce, she already prepared, or she gonna move on from here. She already have things in place. Most times it's the man who's catching up.
Yep.
And she already put things in perspective. And so from my point also, I want to say, if you're a man and you find that you are being disenfranchised by this divorce financially, for me, I was. And because I was a pastor and full-time pastor, and a full-time pastor, if your wife is in a certain career, she's going to make more money than you as a pastor. And I remembered and not only the fact that I was a pastor, but the fact that I felt like I want to walk away from the church for now. I felt like I don't need to be a pastor right now. And so I had to walk away from my financial income. One of the ways, and so I always thought about, how am I going to survive? How am I going to live? Because that with your spouse being your financial partner, and then your job being your financial stream, both are gone. How do you It affects your manhood. It affects your self-esteem. And one of the ways that two things happened for me that I want the men who are listening to me to understand. First of all, reinvent yourself. Reinvent yourself. Go back to school. Because you're never too old to learn, and school now comes to you. You don't have to take time to go to a building. It comes to you. So go back to school. That's one thing, and that's one of the things that I did. The other thing that I did was trust God. You've got to trust God in this process, because it was God that kept me financially. I had to learn now to get prophetic income. What I meant by that, where someone would come and say, Pastor, the Lord told me to send you this. The Lord told me to send you that. And as a man, you don't want to keep taking stuff, but the Lord is telling people to send you stuff. And so you have to be in that process where God is now keeping you in your desert, because divorce drives you to the desert. It can drive you to a lonely place. It can drive you to a barren place. It can drive you to an empty place. And so you've got to become now the person that has an connecting ears, that can hear from God when he's speaking to you, and allow him to provide for you. And believe me, I don't know how I survived it, but only I can say is my will to live and God. And that's what I want to say to the men who are watching, is that if you find yourself going through that, have a will to live. Have a will to live above where you have fallen. And so it's in my book. Please get the book. Please get the book. I'm not afraid to tell you. You see, some people go through divorce and they're scared. They're ashamed. They're ashamed of it. They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
See, that's not good, because what you're doing is you're bottling up all of that, and you're going to explode. I've had friends who've gone through divorce and they don't want to talk about it. They're scared to talk about it. They think it's a sin to talk about it. Listen, it is not. You've got to find an outlet. So for the men who are watching me and Pastor McKee today on this network, if this is your avenue to let it out, we're saying to you today, let it out.
Yes.
It is okay to go through these process. Let me kind of highlight them as we discuss. It is okay for you to go through the emotional distress. You're going to have that. Express yourself. It is also, don't skip the grieving process. Grieve. You're going to face custody issues. Deal with it properly so it won't affect your children, because your children are important to you, and I have learned that. I have learned from not having a dad to learning to see a dad at 16 who died, that I had to end up burying, who never supported me, didn't realize he was going to get old, thought he was going to live forever, so he didn't support his children or his child. And now his child turned around supporting him at the end. You as a man may think you're macho, you're grown, you're not going to need your children. You're going to need them. So be careful how you do that. The last thing, Pastor McKee, I want to talk about is the increased health risk in marriage. The increased health risk in divorce, sorry. So in the midst of drastic change and having your life uprooted in a dramatic fashion, one of the issues men face is increased health concerns after divorce. A lot of men don't know that. We talk some about the emotional impact, but following a split, men have been shown to be at an elevated risk of hypertension, heart disease, and even cancer, among other concerns. Now, there is no specific study that shows what causes this, but the breakdown of your emotions and so forth, stress, all of those stuff can cause some of these sicknesses. So getting back out there after divorce is no easy task, and moving forward is a challenge. So my thing is, I can't say that I've experienced that in mine, and I don't. And if you haven't, I don't want you to tell us that you did.
Yeah.
But because stress breaks down the immune system. I thank you for that. It breaks down the immune system. So maybe that's why the studies shows that
Yeah.
because those stuff happen. And let me tell you, let me ask you, since we're talking about health issues, how at what level, how high was your stress level?
Um, it was very high. It was very high. I think when you really, and I'm not taking anything away from men that don't sit on certain seats of leadership, but when you sit on certain seats of leadership, no matter what that might be, but especially in, like, say, the church world, and you sit in a seat where people are looking to you, you're used to be the one that's giving and releasing your teaching, your preaching, your counseling, so you're always kind of releasing and imparting. Um, and then now you hit a snag, and I'm gonna call it. I don't want to minimalize it, but you hit now a snag or a rut, a ditch in your life that
Well, you're
unexpected.
at the right point, because I said the topic that we're coming from my book, it says divorce is not final, so it's a snag. So
Yeah,
you're on
so
the
it's a snag, exactly. So then it's like now you have to now really look around and say to yourself, wow, what just happened? So now your stress level and your anxiety level goes way up because you are now internalizing a lot of things, and there's a lot of external pressures and a lot of external forces being kind of released on you, because now people are changing on you. People are treating you different, acting funny. You're hearing, you're starting to hear a lot of banter, a lot of critique, a lot of, everyone has an opinion, but people love to have an opinion on things that they don't really know about. And you start to hear a lot of those things come full circle, and you start to hear it. So your stress level just goes way up. And stress does have a profound impact. I work in the medical field, so I've been able to read a lot of things concerning how our immune system, how our overall health and equilibrium responds to stress, anxiety, and even just your mindset. Do you know it's possible based on your mind over matter? Your mind can start to tell you you're sick, and then your body follows.
absolutely.
And inversely, your mind, you can say to yourself, psychologically, you can say, I'm well, I'm healthy. Or in spite of what the doctor might have told you, you can say, no, I refuse to accept that. And your mind, being your mind over matter, your mind can keep you in a state of health where your body can recover from a sickness, because mentally you've established a strength to choose to recover. So can you imagine now that the stress, the anxiety, it does have a profound effect on the health of a man. So when you're going through a divorce, that stress level can really play itself out, and you start to have all types of things going on with your body that you never experienced before. So it's so important to manage the stress, not to beat yourself up, and not to succumb to the anxiety from a fallout from a divorce. So that's what my response would be.
Absolutely. And so we have about 5 to 10 minutes, because we're going to wrap this up. We're over time. Now, let me say to the men who are watching us, dealing with the whole health issues right now, the loss of a wife and possible children can be monumental, even crushing to you. So facing a new uncertain future, it is easy for men to sink into depression and turn to alcohol, drugs, other high risk behaviors to fill that void. Suicide rates tend to increase in men in the wake of a divorce. So while that may be the more extreme end of the spectrum, it is easy to lose motivation to exercise, to eat right, and generally take care of yourself, especially if your wife was the one doing all of that aspect of making sure you eat right, making sure the food she cook is correct, making sure to maintain your physical and mental welfare in those tough times is a priority for you to get back on your feet. Because if you want to go on with your life, no woman want to take up a man who's broken. You've got to learn how to keep yourself healthy mentally, psychologically, and also emotionally.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't do that, you're going to pass that on to the next person in your life. So when the next person coming to your life does not get a husband, but get a broken baby. And so that's why these are just some of the issues men face after divorce. Things are changing out there in our world. Though it's a gradual process, social roles are evolving. Men are no longer always expected to be the sole breadwinner or to be stoic and stone-faced when confronted with painful issues. Stay-at-home dads are increasingly common. Child rearing is no longer the exclusive domain of the woman. And so the shift in all of these stuff affects men differently than it would have affected men 20 years ago. And so 20 years ago, the man most time would have had the handle while the woman had the blade because he's bringing in the dough and she's having all these kids. Nowadays, women are managing their bodies more. They're managing their how many kids they have so that they don't get left with the bag. And so things are changing. Divorce can be trying, can be a difficult time. There are a number of issues that men face, and these can be tricky times. But one way to make your case flow smoothly in a divorce in terms of your life is to make sure that number one, that God is the center of your life. Never, ever lose God in the process. Never lose God in the process because you're going to need him. And I have learned that. I have learned that I needed God more than I needed him in my marriage. I needed him more in my divorce. And that was a reality, because one of the things that divorce brings on us as men is a sense of loneliness, which my last point, and I'm getting there now. How do I handle being single? How do I handle now going back to being single? Talk to me, Pastor McKee. You have about 2 minutes. How do you handle going back to being single? What did it take for you? How did it affect you? How do you move back into the world of single man?
It is a complete rewiring. That's the phrase, or that's the word I want to use. It is a rewiring, because you go from having physical access, sexual access, to not having it. So based on our faith, that is a complete rewiring, because now mentally you have to say to yourself, okay, now I got to shut down the parts of my brain, the parts of my mind that expects a certain level of activity in my love life, right? Because now you have to retrain yourself to discipline the nature, that the normal part of who we are as men, that has a sex drive, and that you're gonna feel what you feel, and you're gonna want what you want at certain times and certain moments, and that's normal, that's natural, it's healthy. But the truth of the matter is, now you're not married, or you're not with that person that you had access to routinely or regularly. So now you have to rewire yourself. Then there's that emotional fallout, right? Because now that support system, or having that person in your corner that you could go home to and just talk to, and that companionship is not necessarily there either. That's a rewiring too, you know? So you have to really, you use the word, and I think that it's so appropriate right now. You are really reinventing yourself, going back to being single on every level. But most importantly, you have to love yourself and like yourself. And you have to value yourself enough to know this might be a necessary part of my journey to rediscover who I am, to rediscover my real values, the things that I rest on, and the things that I'm willing to build and rebuild to become a better version of myself. So that for the next time, because for all intents and purposes, I know you can say the same, I know I can say the same. The objective and my goal is to remarry and to be happily remarried, and for it to be the last one. 'Cause I'm not gonna do it again. But that's the mindset, that's the goal. But I want to be the absolute best version of myself than I was even that first time. And
Thank
so
you,
that's how
Pastor.
you structure.
Thank you, Pastor McKee. Oh, it was great talking to you today, man. A great session.
Oh, same
I
here,
hope
Bishop.
that I hope that, not just for the men, but if you're a woman watching this, some of these what we have said also can be a part of the strategy for you going through the
Yes.
divorce. But we wanted to talk to the men who feel like who a lot of women have this stereotypical idea that men don't go through emotional aspect of divorce, and we do. We go through the emotional part of it. We have the feelings with the sense of loss, the loneliness, the loss of intimacy, the fear of dating again, the fear of going through a second divorce, the fear of maybe taking up the wrong woman in your life. So we go through all of that, and so we wanted to talk about that. So thank you for being a part of this today and for sharing this. It's been really great having you on our program today, sir. We will be back.
Honored,
We
honored,
will
honored.
be
Thank
back
you.
on the first Saturday of November. The first Saturday of November, we will be back with this program. Remember, please, for everyone who's watching this, go to the Oneil Effect on Facebook.com to order the copy of Stop the Procession, It's Your Time to Win in the book. And some of these notes will be in the book. In the book, we dealt with divorce is not final. Divorce is not final. So I am asking you to please get the book. Don't just say, you know what, others are going to get it, so I'm not going to. No. We've had we had a good takeoff when we just introduced it, but it has slowed down. And so many of you are watching me. And if every person that is watching this show go out and get this book, by next month, we'll reach the goal we have in mind. So it is in your time. It is your time to win. We're in pre-sale mode. So it's a great price, $15 at a limited time. You can also go to the phoenixnationalbusinessgroup.com to order as well. Enter the code PNBG for a special price. Please help us to reach our goal. November 1st is when we're hoping that we get to a certain point. We're not even close there yet. So I need you. If you're watching me as a pastor, please advertise this book in your congregation so that this is going to be a great book. I need the support of all our pastors, all our friends. I will also be available to sign copies for you. See you next month. Remember,